This is exactly why we have guardian dogs. Hear that? Livestock guardian dogs are absolutely essential to the operations of our farm, but because I was way less prepared than I thought I was when I first brought these guys home, they ended up being my biggest challenge and ultimately my biggest failure as a farmer. To think that a mistake that I made would have put them in danger, it's tough to swallow. Let's rewind back to April of 2020 when I brought Johnny and June, my Colorado mountain dogs, home for the first time. Right off the bat, we had a pretty huge problem. My initial plan with the dogs was to keep them with the goats 24/7 as I worked on training June and making sure that Johnny really was trustworthy with all the rest of the livestock as well. We do rotational grazing with the goats, which uses electric wire netting, and since Johnny and June were already trained to that when we got them, it seemed like it would be no problem to just continue that with them here. But as spring approached and the grass here started growing faster than the goats could possibly keep up with it, the electric netting posed its first problem. All right. Just need to move them about 800,000 more times and they'll have the whole pasture mowed. Get to work, guys. Start mowing. Our lush, rich pasture was growing so fast that it was grounding out the electric wire on the fence, and when the electricity stopped working, so did the fence. So Johnny started jumping over the electric fence and taking me on hours, sometimes days-long puppy chases all over creation. I'm out of my ATV right now looking for Johnny and June because there are some neighbors that have some company from out of town that don't know about the fact that we have livestock guardian dogs. Anyway, they had their dogs running all over our property. Johnny and June jumped the fence and went off after them, and now I can't find them. So frustrating little start to the morning for sure. It's now oh my gosh, there's June. Are you kidding me? June, where were you? To try to solve the long grass problem, I was like, oh great, I will just mow a square where I want to put the fence. But of course, nothing can be that easy. Because I do intensive rotational grazing with my goats, I need to move the fence every 2 days. I'm dyslexic and I have pretty severe spatial issues, and so no matter how I measured or marked, it never worked out right. So when I started trying to mow the lawn and, by the 5 or 6 times that I had to re-mow it to get the shape right, something that used to take me 15 minutes was taking 3 or 4 hours, and obviously that's just not sustainable long term. So naturally, I just decided to wing it and try to set up the fence anyway and hope for the best. And honestly, that alone was probably my first and biggest mistake with these dogs, because as soon as the fence stopped working, first opportunity he had, he was gone. Following Johnny and June taking another walk about this morning, there goes all of the things that I had scheduled to do this morning, and now it's 1:12 p.m. and what a glorious time to get started. So I decided to try a higher fence, but the chicken fence being that much higher, it's also that much more heavy. So all of a sudden, this 1-person job that's easy to do is now a 2-person job, and that's if I can even find someone to help me do it. And then that fence stopped working too, because Johnny realized, just like the other fence, when it wasn't hot, he could go right over. Good morning, sunshines. I hope you're having an absolutely fabulous Friday. I had to stop what I was doing right now to come out and deal with a little escapee. Johnny, what are you doing, buddy? So then I tried using an e-collar and a remote to try to continue their training, and that was, again, a little bit helpful, but ultimately didn't work because I had to be there 100% of the time for it to work. And as much as I'd love to lay in the pasture with my animals and be a shepherd full-time, I also have a job. This led to my next bad idea, which was putting an air tag on their collars, which does actually work great if you are 33 feet away from an iPhone because it's not a true GPS tracker, and also Johnny immediately jumped in the pond, rendering it useless. Ever since we moved to Tennessee, I knew that I wanted to build permanent infrastructure like fences that could actually contain the dogs and the rest of our livestock, but on acreage like this, that's not a small endeavor. It's both time and materials, but also extremely cost prohibitive to do that. When we first moved here, I actually had a fence builder come out and give a basic quote on what it would cost to put permanent fencing around the whole place, and pre-2020 lumber hike prices, that was $65,000. Obviously, that was not realistic or possible, so I had to get creative. So I spent the next 6 months building what I thought was going to be a pretty rock solid area where I could at least trust that the dogs would stay, and then I would expand it over time. It worked great until June realized that she could dig out from underneath the gates. So then, with June out, Johnny then became very concerned that June was fenced away from him, so he started climbing the fence to get to June, and there again, smart dogs had discovered an escape route, and now that fence didn't work either. So then I tried putting an electric wire on top of the fence, which would help Johnny jumping over, but didn't really help June going under. And ultimately, Johnny also realized that the shock there wasn't bad enough to actually deter him, so that stopped working too. I do just want to point out really quick that all of these escape attempts were not the dogs actually trying to run away from home. They always started in pursuit of something that these dogs felt to be a predator. Colorado mountain dogs are descended from Great Pyrenees dogs, which have historical records of being in use to protect sheep and other livestock since 1800 BC. So you've got a few thousand years worth of instincts that say, hey, your human fence line is not nearly as big of a threat to me as that neighborhood dog that's running past, or the bobcat that they heard rustling in the forest, or the hawk that they're chasing away from the chicken coop. They also have a terrifying bark and will literally fight to the death to protect their charges. Just last week, our next door neighbors had a barn fire, and their Great Pyrenees saved 6 of their goats by dragging them out of the flames, and then actually ended up dying going back in after the last 3 goats. They are that dedicated and that loyal. So even with all of the escapes and the puppy chases, everything was mostly tolerable until the day that June jumped the fence and attacked the neighbor's chickens. Being a good neighbor is pretty much the most important thing in the world to me. Community is everything, and my dogs, however cute and floofy they may be, and however good they are at protecting my animals from coyotes, them putting other people's animals or our relationships with our neighbors in jeopardy is an absolute no for me. I'm sure you're wondering at this point why I don't just get rid of the dogs. Things are clearly not working. They are causing me so much frustration, so many gray hairs, so many tears, and now they're causing problems with our neighbors too. 2 reasons. 1, I'm extremely stubborn and I hate admitting defeat. And honestly, I couldn't really admit defeat anyway because we need the livestock guardian dogs. Johnny has protected my baby goats by killing a raccoon that got into their pen. June has chased off dozens of hawks. A few weeks ago, when the dogs were actually penned up, one of the neighborhood dogs came and attacked one of my calves and nearly killed it. Had the dogs been out and able to do their duty, that situation could have totally been avoided. And 2, as frustrating as all of this has been, these dogs have become members of our family.
Man, this guy has such a good heart. I just love him. He is so kind. You can just see it in his eyes, and just the way that he cares for the other animals and the way that he responds to me, and I'm lucky to have him.
This is a story for another day, but Johnny saved my life last year, and we're ride or die till the end. The saving grace for my sanity during all of this, and definitely what I'd recommend if you are in a similar position with your dogs, was the fact that I had one area that I could absolutely keep the dogs, and that was in the barnyard that was fenced adequately for them and connected to the barn where I could shut them up when I had no other option and something's about to happen. Hello! Okay. The problem is that that is not a good all-the-time solution because it's our barn and our heavy use area behind it. It just was a stopgap for a few of the problems while we figured things out. Unfortunately, the solutions all took way longer and way more time, effort, and money than I had hoped that they would, and during that time, some of these issues started to compound, like the barking. Because Johnny and June weren't actually able to chase off a lot of the predators, we started to get a lot more predator pressure on the farm. Packs of coyotes were regularly coming within our fence line. Johnny and June were barking at them all night, but because they couldn't chase them off, their only defense was to bark. And all of this came to a head when I got a call at 4 a.m. from one of my neighbors, absolutely fed up with the barking, and that was a pretty low point for me because these neighbors are some of our best friends. I was upset with myself for not being able to come up with a solution faster. 2 years of trying my best and having it still not be good enough, and then to have another relationship with another neighbor jeopardized by these dogs that I love so much. I had never felt like a bigger failure as a farmer or a friend because it shouldn't have taken 2 years to figure that out. When I miss big things like this, it kind of triggers something in me. I mean, like, one of the big reasons that I farm is to help me with things that I am not good at, like consistency and routine and schedules. And so when I drop the ball on those things, it's a major trigger for all of the other areas that I failed in those ways all through my life, and this could be a big one. And I care so much about my animals. It's tough to swallow. But right after that call from my neighbors, my friend Kate called me to tell me that she had gotten a GPS collar for one of her dogs and that it had totally changed her relationship with the dog. As luck would have it though, the same day that I talked to Kate about her new dog collar, I got a message on Instagram from a company who had seen my series of stories about my dog escapes. They were coming out with a new dog collar that had far improved GPS accuracy, and they were looking for people with livestock guardian dogs to test the product. And at that point with the dogs, I didn't have anything else to lose and everything to gain if this product actually worked the way that they said it would. When it came to actually training Johnny and June to use the spot-on collars correctly, we started with short leashes and high-value treats. We established the boundaries of the fence, we tested it on ourselves first, and then we started taking the dogs on leashed walks around the perimeter and started approaching the fence. When the collars would beep, we would run away from the fence, get a treat, and we would basically train them to hear the beep and turn and walk in the other direction. After we got used to doing this on the shorter leads, I started moving to much longer leads, so I used the donkey training leashes. Then ultimately, I had to just trust them and let them free, which is again why it was very important to have one fenced area where I knew I could pretty much trust the fences and reinforce the visual boundaries of the collars. But basically, once Johnny and June understood that when they heard the beeping noise on their collar, it meant that they needed to turn around and walk the other direction, they were as good as trained. I was able to train our Goldador Rigby to use the collars in an afternoon, but it took me almost 8 weeks to get Johnny and June up to speed on how these things actually work. And this is actually because of a very key difference between house-trained pet dogs and livestock guardians as a breed. Rigby comes from a line of dogs that have been bred to be companions to humans. They are bred to look to us for instruction. He lives on me throwing his ball and giving him food and water and telling him exactly what to do when, and that's when he really thrives. Livestock guardian dogs, on the other hand, were not meant to be companions for humans. They were meant to be guardians of livestock. They were bred to think independently, not to obey commands. In fact, they were working while their owners were sleeping, so they had to think for themselves. They had to make decisions. They had to be able to rely on their own instincts rather than waiting for someone else to tell them what to do, which is exactly why it is so dang hard to tell them what to do. The coolest thing about these GPS collars is that once you've got your dogs really understanding how they work, you can change the parameters or the boundaries of their fence depending on what you want them to be doing. So say you are working on training your dog to stay away from your chickens for a little while. So you can literally make a virtual fence around your chicken coop that will keep your dog out of that area until you're ready to have them in that area. We can have the goats out on pasture again, and I no longer have to worry about their electric netting being grounded out or anything else, because I just walk Johnny around the perimeter of this new boundary and he gets it, and if he approaches it, his collar beeps to tell him, hey, we're not leaving here, and so he doesn't. This entire time we've been out here filming, the dogs have had free reign of whatever they needed to do. If you've watched this channel at all, you know that I'm not a super tech savvy person, but the technology involved in these collars is pretty freaking amazing. The GPS boundary outlines are always within a foot or two of the boundaries that I've set. And that's crazy considering we're talking about signals coming from satellites in space. But somehow it works. The app is also super user-friendly, and Spot On notifies me if they leave their boundary line and then track them past their boundary line if they leave. 3 years ago, even if I had known that this technology existed, I honestly don't know if I would have gotten them because it's a big investment. But 3 years into this journey, the peace of mind that comes from having an app on my phone alert me if they've escaped, all of a sudden the money honestly doesn't matter at all. Because replacing the dogs at this point would be a far greater expense. I now have 3 years of building relationship and investing in their training, and I honestly don't know if I'd have it in me if I had to start over. It's the middle of winter right now, so this turned out to be a perfect time to train the dogs to use their collars in a more strictly defined boundary area. But we've already started doing testing out on the main pasture where there are no visible boundaries, and it's going great. And that is the thing that is really going to be a game changer for the farm and for me in general, because it means that we get to get the animals out of the barn and the heavy use area. We get to stop paying for feed and hay in the barn. We get to have the animals back out on pasture and fully protected by the dogs, which is kind of where we've been working to get to for 3 years now. I am so excited for what's coming on the farm and with our school build this spring. I hope you stick around to be part of it. Cheers.